Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video. So, we're back with the news, and there's a lot to process this week. Blizzard did another Q&A, and the community reaction wasn't exactly positive. Now, I think I have a fairly different angle to share in this one, though, so while there is a lot to get into with Azerite, there's some other stuff to talk about, and there is also some good information that's like, you know, alt-friendliness, stuff like that, which is good, that I'm going to split out. So, we're going to do the good stuff first, then I'm going to talk about why I think the Q&As tend to go down this way, and then we're going to go over the top into Azerite no man's land. First though, the month's Patreon awards just arrived. They are down here. You can check them out in the link in the description. Yeah, they're really, really lovely. And I'm also going to throw in, and we have some spare stuff for our game as well. So may as well throw them in. And yeah, you can check that out on the Patreon. Also, my virtual ticket giveaway is only on for a few more hours. So yeah, today's your last chance to check that out and maybe grab a virtual ticket. But okay, let's hop into the news, starting off with Warfronts. Okay, so first up we see Ian confirm something that we had seen in the PTR, and that is that the new Darkshore Warfront is going to be active at the same time as the existing one. So this pretty much doubles what you can do with Warfronts. Now, remember that the rewards of Warfronts, they're actually tied to, like, not to a given week. They're tied to the Warfront cycle itself. So by having 2 Warfronts running, that means every month you're going to get 2 world bosses, you're going to get 2 370 chests, you're going to get 2 weeks of, you know, hand-ins, so that's a lot of Azerite. And I suppose this should make the game feel a good bit more lively, though, of course, it has yet to be seen how much, you know, of the gameplay feel of Darkshore will be different to Stromgarde, but yeah, there's definitely, like, it's heating up there. Now, next, Altfriendliness, and I think there's good news here. First, Blizzard are soon going to double the rep gains from Legion World Quests in order to help new players to BFA unlock their allied races a bit faster. I think that's a solid move, actually, but they're doing more with reps. So we already know that the Champions of Azeroth HOA item level increase will be effectively made account-wide in 8.1. Well, they're going a little bit further by making each chapter of the war campaign also reward a significant amount of reputation, such that by the time you finish one chapter, you'll actually be close to starting the next. I think that makes good sense because they're going to be adding new war campaign chapters in 8.1, and Ian did sort of tease like doing some other alt-friendliness things, but that's pretty much, you know, the body of what he announced. And then next up we have raid itemization, and like if this seems boring, don't worry, it's actually kind of cool what they mentioned. So yeah, basically they said they are going to be experimenting with adding more interesting mini sets within raids. Now these have already existed outside of raids. I think Legion's like Chrono Shard was a really good, well-known example of that. Now of course balancing these may be challenging because maybe a certain thing is only available to certain classes, maybe it's OP for a few specs, but I think it's an interesting design space and it allows for more long-form goals when progressing your character. I just love to see more stuff happening with mini sets and all that stuff across the board, making gear bits just feel more unique. I think the more goals, the better, rather than sort of the amorphous long-term one of just, oh, broadly, you know, I want to increase my item level. So there you go. That is, I think, the good stuff about the Q&A. They also, you know, Ian a lot of the times did say, look, I don't want to seem like I'm dismissing or this or that. So he was aware of what the community generally thinks. And on the topic of classes, they mostly did say, you know, sensible things, but we just have to wait and see what actually comes out on the PTR before I can really go into that. Okay, so with that, you know, good, positive, fun stuff covered, it's time to jump into the Q&A. You know, if that was the starter, this is the main course. And look, it's been a bit of a theme of the last while that sometimes these Q&As don't go down well with players, and I'm fairly sure that I know why. So I'm going to keep on doing what I do, explaining to Blizzard why they are perceived by the community in the way that they are. I want them to solve this problem. I know at the very least that they don't want to wake up in the morning to pitchforks, but first I actually have to do something a little bit different here. Part of the problem is the Q&A itself. I mean, first, from a viewer perspective, look, these are real boring, they're really dry. The signal to noise ratio and the questions is real rough. I don't need to hear about RP PvP realm sharding again, just put that in a blue post. But the problem's kind of deeper than that, and I know from experience where, you know, I've done things on the spot, like podcasts, or, you know, I record a video without a script. If you've ever had to talk to people free-form, then you know about this too. The fundamental problem of the Q&A is that it puts Ian on the spot. Now, look, he should be able to talk about the game in detail and all that stuff, but this isn't a long-form podcast where he gets to hash out his opinion, have a back and forth with a host that'll eventually allow him to get closer to the best form of his argument. This is a Q&A where Ian is going to feel like he has to get through questions quickly to cover loads of topics, and he's put in the spot. The best that we can get is what's off the top of his head, and when you look into this Q&A, you see some answers answers that are kind of sloppy and in a few instances are contradictory either with themselves or other designs in the game. Now, we've got to think about Ian the man instead of just, the larger than life sort of thing, and the sort of day he'll have, and I can relate to some bits of that on a very small scale. So currently I do the game dev stuff. There's 2 projects, with a small team, and I work in an overall directorial producer role, not dissimilar to what he's doing. On top of that, I do the YouTube channel. Basically, I fill several different job roles. So in a given day, I'll have writing for videos, all that stuff, and also multiple meetings. It's pretty damn hectic, and that's just doing it indie. Now, while I'm sure that Ian does have an assistant and all those things to help him out with stuff, I can't imagine how maddening and just intense his average workday is. The sheer amount of meetings he'll have, talking to different design leads, the amount of decisions that are really important and stressful that he has to make. The point is, I know that if you were to grab me halfway through the day with a bunch of big, complex topics to talk about, I would have an unacceptably high miss rate. Basically, I think that this whole Q&A format is, in the way that it's currently being used, I think it sets the man up to fail. Now, I just don't think we're getting the best form of his arguments, and I think this is part of why we, maybe community people, feel like we're making little progress. I'm sure that after every Q&A, he's just kicking himself, thinking, I wish I said this or said that differently. We've all had meetings or calls that we know could have went better after the fact. So personally, I think they should bring back the old dev water cooler posts and not the weak feeling promo ones that they do sometimes about now. I mean the real long form discussions on design philosophy that Ghostcrawler used to do way back in the day. Now, while people may have disagreed with maybe what Ghostcrawler thought, at least you were disagreeing with a well-structured and complete form of his argument. And being able to engage clearly with that's like the base condition needed to make progress. And that's what really matters. And I think we're kind of struggling to reach that at this point. Now, I'm aware that this is going to come off to some people like I'm making excuses for Blizzard, but really, just like how I try to explain to Blizzard why the community perceives them in a certain way, I think it's only fair that I also try to explain to the community why they might be perceiving Blizzard in a certain way, ideally so that Blizzard can learn from that and communicate in a more effective manner. So look, Blizzard, I just say it's the time to take criticism to heart and maybe make changes about how you roll with some of this stuff. But hold that waffle out of the way. It is Azerite time. Oh boy howdy, here we go. So the discussion was dominated by Azerite, and it was in a bit of a messy scattershot manner. Didn't really go down too well. Now, part of that is because, I do think Blizzard have a disagreeable position, but also because the format makes it hard for them to clearly present it, and we'll really see a lot of that now. So let's kick things off with traits being locked to a bit of gear. The answer was strange. He said that generally bits of loot are bits of loot. They're fixed in nature, and the past tier sets changing with your spec. That was an exception to the norm. That's interesting. But I think he may have forgotten how gear in World of Warcraft works, because primary stats on most bit of gear swap with your spec. This was brought in with Warlords of Draenor in order to better facilitate people multi-rolling with the same core set of gear, with the design intent being the customization would come from your trinkets and your jewelry. So within the context of the modern game, having a head, a shoulder, and a chest swap their primary stats when you swap your spec, but not swap their traits when you swap spec, those things seem discordant, and it doesn't really make sense to me. Now, he also said that they didn't just want to add a bunch of traits that you could always swap between, because then it would just sort of feel like an extended version of talents, and they didn't want that gameplay of constantly swapping things around on a per-fight basis. Well, first of all, that's kind of odd, because with talents, they clearly are happy with you doing a certain amount of that when raiding, and also, this system exists instead of new talents. So from a player's perspective, it would be fine to be able to swap those things around. Now, looking at Legion, the artifact, while it technically did add various new traits, they were baseline for everyone because there was no choice within their progression, meaning that swapping around legendaries was pretty much the Legion version of talents. Now, that is a little bit more analogous, but the thing with the legendaries is, once they were unlocked, they were yours forever. They were unlocked, their item level kept pace, and they had such a high item level that they were always fantastic versus your other gear, and there was a limited pool of them, so you could earn them all. So you could freeform swap between them fairly easily. Well, with Azerite, you have something similar, but with a far larger quantity of gear per spec. That means that it feels like a far larger system than the legendaries did, and it's one that constantly requires reevaluation because Azerite is also just regular gear that has an item level, but of course with traits as well, versus the legendaries, which were so powerful, they existed outside the regular gear roster. So I do understand why Blizzard thinks like this, but I also don't think that thinking carries through to the gameplay successfully. Now, Now, the upshot of all this is more reforging, which Ian did talk about. So of course, reforging is designed to prevent you from swapping an individual bit of gear's traits, because instead what they want you to do is have multiple sets. Now, this actually runs counter to the logic that he mentioned in this very Q&A. Ian said that with gear sets back in the day, they didn't like, or say in Warlords onwards, they didn't like you farming dupes of an item for, you know, the holy version and the rep version. They thought that was a bad experience. Well, I agree with him, but reforging encourages you to do that, which just doesn't make sense. He also said that reforging is there to prevent Azerite from feeling like another sort of talent, and Laura even pointed out that an older version of this system would have had you like being locked into your traits for like weeks. Now, overall, this still shows that Azerite is meant to be less about the active customization of your character and more about you get a bit of gear and then you decide what that gear is. Now, I'm glad they loosened up on that, but I do actually understand how they originally wanted Azerite to feel there, but I just don't think it plays that nice with the rest of the game and the incentives the players will feel, both the social incentives to their fellow players and also the incentives designed by the reward systems that Blizzard have made. Now, this is where things get kind of messy. Ian said that reforging isn't that big for most people, and it's, you know, it's only like 5 or 10 gold, and that the cost goes down really quickly. Now, on absolute terms for all players playing WoW, Ian is correct, but for the players who actively engage in that system because they are really excited about the mechanics of World of Warcraft, so basically raiders, that's not the case. Raiders might want to go through a few different builds a night based on boss design. Now, even if we were to get more interesting, say like AoE or single target traits in 8.1, well, that actually might make the problem worse, making people want to reforge even more. Basically, for the people that this gameplay is relevant to, reforging is really rough. For the people for whom the gameplay is a non-factor, of course it isn't rough. We can't let the latter group muddle the statistics. Now, Ian also did seem to forget that people might want to multi-roll. So, as an example, Matt, who you'll have seen a lot in this channel's gameplay, he plays Holy with me in Arena, he raids Protection, which you will have seen, and he does the rest in Ret. Now me, I play a Monk, Brewmaster for Dungeons, and the rest, including the Arena, is Windwalker, but soon I'll be doing Mistweaver for my Arena gameplay. So in a given night, say between doing a Dungeon and an Arena, I might want to reforge twice. Either that or just farm up loads more Azerite gear, which, as we covered before, kind of goes against how they've been designing most of the gearing system of World of Warcraft for the last maybe 4 or 5 years. Well, it would take me 6 days for the reforge multiplier to cool down from doing that. Well, if someone was to reforge an average of 3 times a week for 10 weeks, that's 30 reforges across 70 days, so 30 doublings of cost and about 23 halvings of cost, meaning that for many players, those who are the most engaged and care the most about this game, their baseline reforge cost will have crept up over time. Now, this might be why reforging is becoming more and more of a hot topic as time passes. Now, he said that for these players, the generic traits are a good option. Yeah, I mean, if you want to do casually, that's fine. You'll lose a few percent, and literally it won't kill you, but do remember that it will feel bad, and feeling is very important. You will feel like the game is forcing you into a suboptimal route so that you avoid its negative reinforcement. Again, it just kind of feels like the system was designed by aliens who are not thinking about human nature. Now, he went on to contradict a point by saying that patch 8.1's outer ring traits won't have a generic trait. Well, here's the thing. If one ring doesn't have a generic trait, then in effect, none of them do, which kills his response. Now, this is just another example of these responses being really, really messy, and like, this isn't good communication, and I think a part of this is because of the inherent weaknesses of the Q&A format. Now, of course, there were some good things. He talked about how, you know, some of the failed designs of 8.0 traits are going to be retired in favor of newer and more interesting ones for 8.1. Some of these are on PTR right now, and I've looked at them. They're so much better than the launch group. Some of them are really cool. But that said, I do kind of worry that having more interesting specified traits in this extra ring, which has 2 traits per spec, surely that's going to lead to even more reforging than what we have now, which could be a problem. Now, Ian also did say they're going to polish up the tooltips on some traits, like Power of the Horde, to be more descriptive, and like basically he laughed over how bad that was. Suffice to say, I think they understand that one. You know, like as an aside, I suppose as well, that just makes me think I'd love to see advanced tooltips being brought back. I think that'll be a really good toggle in the interface options. So there you go. That's it for the Q&A. Look, I hope I've been able to articulate to Blizzard why their answers did not really work out well for players, and I hope I've been able to articulate to players why Blizzard may not have been presenting the best version of their arguments because of the format of the Q&A. Look, I don't think I would agree with Blizzard that much, even if they were presenting their best argument, like in its best form, but I at least think that that would provide us a really clear basis to move on from and have a civil discussion, rather than the kind of messy back and forth and pecking the hornet's nest that's been happening quite a lot now that's kind of getting me down a bit. So there you go, that's it for this video. As always, I want to hear what you've got to say about all this stuff. I've been trying out YouTube premieres. You may have noticed it for the Xalatath video, but if you hit the bell, you'll be notified for the premiere, and that basically has everyone hanging out live as a video was initially posted. I tested out with the Zal video. We were hanging out in chat, and it seemed really cool. So you can check that out. Of course, you can also check out the Patreon if you want to support the channel. We've got the physical rewards, which I covered earlier, as well as early access with vlog content on the way. So that's, this week's update for Azeroth. Certainly an interesting one. Sometimes I kind of feel like I've got to go in and clean up a mess that's happened. Like I wake up in the morning, I go to Reddit/WoW, and I just kind of, my eyes glaze over as the top 5 threads are like extremely full of doom, which, I don't want that to keep on happening, right? I want that to happen less. And I don't know. I hope that the route that I'm taking with this, where it's trying to explain to Blizzard why people feel a certain way, is the way forward that will maybe help them understand players' issues a little bit more. But, let me know if you think that's the right path or not, of course. Thank you very much for watching. Let me know what you thought, and I will see you next time.